News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store for a tag, and the back it says USA.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. Thank you so much for spending some time with us on your busy Saturday afternoon. I so appreciate that you are here with us. We have growing body of fans and fans who want to review the news of the week while upholding core values that are never going to die, regardless of what happens in our culture and regardless of what happens on Capitol Hill. Yet, you know, we've had a series of gloom and doom shows. However, I have to say that today is the opposite of that because we have quite a lot of good news. A lot of good news on Capitol Hill this week. And it is because of shows like this and people like you out there who are making a hell of a lot of noise, as some stories are not dying, and we are pushing and pushing and pushing Congress to do its job. And they are really stepping up to the plate. So I'm in a celebratory mood. The first piece of really good news is that now the Speaker of the House, John Boehner, has at last capitulated, and we are going to have a select committee on Benghazi. What a big, big victory this is. And I'll tell you why. There's been a lot of committees on Benghazi, but they don't necessarily have the information. They don't all have the same information. So the select committee is going to be able to gather them all together, as well as it has more powers to subpoena individuals and get more of the facts that we need in order to finally understand why this tragedy happened and who is to blame. And there's a lot of talk. A lot of us seem to know the answers, but it's one thing to say we know the answers, and it's another thing to prove it. And what Congress has done very well over the course of the last few months is bit by bit by bit, more and more of the information comes out. And what they're also doing is they're squeezing a lot of the key players involved so that slowly we are getting a clearer picture of who is to blame and exactly what happened. Now, Boehner has been known by the Tea Party folks as somewhat of an obstructionist in terms of getting to the bottom of a lot of the issues that move so many of the American people. Yet, finally, even he had to agree that we do need to take this investigation to the next level. And this is as good as you're going to get from John Boehner. Listen to how he explained why a select committee on Benghazi is now absolutely necessary. Roll it.
Most of you know that I thought and continued to believe until last week that our four committees that have been investigating Benghazi have done a very good job. But a line was crossed last week. It was crossed in two places. One, when it became clear that the White House played a more significant role in the developments of how they were going to describe this, certainly more than anything that had been disclosed thus far. And then secondly, when it became clear that documents were turned over to a private organization that, frankly, have been blocked in terms of giving them to us. It was time for us to bring this together into one place and to focus our efforts. This is all about getting to the truth. There's not going to be a sideshow. There's not going to be a circus. This is a serious investigation. Listen, our system of government depends on transparency and accountability. We owe it to the future of our country and to the next administration to do our job, to make it clear that the types of activities that may have gone on here are not acceptable in our system of government.
So the key developments essentially is that we can now trace the communication strategy undeniably to Mr. Rhodes, who's a key player in the White House, and he wanted to ensure that the public believed that the attacks on Benghazi had to do with a spontaneous protest, a video, you know, the whole 9 yards, and not to do with, quote unquote, a failure of policy. So that email that was uncovered and that came about because Judicial Watch forced the hand of the administration to release it, and to release it without all those redactions. Now we know clearly that it was a deliberately crafted policy. It wasn't just a mistake. You know, they've kind of been trying to say perhaps that one set of bureaucracy wasn't communicating properly with another set of the bureaucracy, and somehow all this got confused. Well, by pounding and pounding and pounding away, by pressing forward, especially asking key people involved what they knew and when they knew it, the administration cannot escape the truth. When the acting director, the former deputy director of the CIA, who became the acting director of the CIA, Mike Morrell, was asked, where did this spontaneous video theory come? He said that he had nothing to do with it. When he was asked, why did you guys all ignore the information that came from the ground, but you preferred the assessment of Washington, he was inadequate in his response. So we can see who the players are that have tried to muddy the waters, but they are not succeeding, because with each layer of the onion that is peeled, more information comes out, and more of it allows us to ground our assessment on solid, incontrovertible fact. In other words, if you're an honest reporter, if you're an honest citizen, you have to conclude that a select committee is necessary, and you have to conclude that this investigation is far, far, far from over. Well, there's one person who's not honest at all about all of this, and that's someone who has a lot to hide. Remember, when she was called to testify, that is Hillary Clinton, she was the Secretary of State when this was all going on, she was called to testify shortly before she concluded her tenure, and she was out of commission for almost a month. She was hospitalized, she hit her head, she had a virus, the ailments piled on and on until she finally did testify. But even that testimony is still inadequate and requires a lot more digging, a lot more probing of Hillary Clinton's role in all of this. Yet, in a recent interview, she is trying to convince the American public that there's no there there. Listen to this.
Benghazi, the new investigation. Are you satisfied with the answers, and are you content with what you know what happened?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, there are a lot of reasons why, despite all of the hearings, all of the information that's been provided, some choose not to be satisfied and choose to continue to move forward. That's their choice, and I do not believe there is any reason for it to continue in this way, but they get to call the shots in the Congress.
You know, here she's trying to blame simply the Republicans in Congress, as, you know, suggesting clearly that they're just being partisan. But what she's clearly ignoring is that it's the American people that are supporting what Congress is doing. You have the American people that are urging Congress to keep going. You have a very vocal part of the American public that says that we are not satisfied. And most important of all, you have the family members of the 4 Americans who died who are saying that we have not had a full and thorough investigation and we still don't have the answers. So this is not a matter merely of partisan choice, which is clearly what she's saying. This is a matter that goes to the heart of our republic. Can our government hold public officials accountable? And do we get truth and justice when we're discussing the death of 4 Americans? Now, one thing that I'm totally thrilled about is the man who has been selected to head the investigation is none other than South Carolina Republican Trey Gowdy. I love this guy. I think a lot of you love him. He's a straight-talking, sincere, person. He's a former prosecutor, and you can see that. He's brilliant, he's capable, he's cagey, he's got a lot of integrity, and more than all of this, he is courageous and he's got nerves of steel. He is going to head up this investigation, and I am so thrilled with that choice. Listen to how he acquitted himself recently in an interview. One of the first questions he was asked was, well, I understand that you have received a death threat the moment that it was announced that you were appointed. Listen to this.
Well, Megan, first of all, thank you for saying that. I was a prosecutor for 16 years. This is not my first death threat. I'm always happy when it doesn't come from my wife, and this one did not. So I'm going to be fine, and it's not going to keep me from doing my job.
Good man. Let's talk about Hillary Clinton. She comes out tonight and suggests that people like you, I assume, are choosing not to be satisfied, that that's your choice, and the rest of us will have to live with it. Your thoughts on that?
Well, you can add to that the factions, and I would just ask Secretary Clinton, with all due respect, can you explain why we were still in Benghazi after everyone else had pulled out and after the British ambassador was almost assassinated and our compound was attacked twice? There are 3 separate categories of questions, each with subunits within them that have not been answered. I realize it's been 20 months, but time is no barometer of thoroughness. My daughter took Latin for 3 years. She still can't speak it. So time does not mean something is thorough. When we get through with this select committee, those questions will be answered for the family members, and Ms. Clinton will have another chance to come and talk to us.
Indeed, indeed. I love what he said. Time is no barometer of thoroughness, an example of his brilliance. And you know, this man, Trey Gowdy, he has been at the forefront of calling for a tough investigation on Benghazi. You recall that in October of 2013, he shamed the press in a conference which really has gone viral on YouTube, and it's cited again and again. I just want to remind all of you out there of what he did back then, how powerfully he spoke, how brilliantly he spoke, and how he is one of the people that kept it alive. Roll it.
Do any of you know why Susan Rice was picked? The Secretary of State did not go. She says she doesn't like Sunday talk shows. That's the only media venue she does not like, if that's true. Why was Susan Rice on the 5 Sunday talk shows? Do you know the origin of this mythology that it was spawned as a spontaneous reaction to a video? Do you know where that started? Do you know how we got from no evidence of that to that being the official position of the administration? In conclusion, Congress is supposed to provide oversight. The voters are supposed to provide oversight. And you were supposed to provide oversight. That's why you have special liberties, and that's why you have special protections. I am not surprised that the President of the United States called this a phony scandal. I'm not surprised that Secretary Clinton asked, what difference does it make? I'm not even surprised that Jay Carney said Benghazi happened a long time ago. I'm just surprised at how many people bought it.
And what he was really saying is, how many of you in the press have kept silent when you should be the whistleblowers and the guardians of our republic? But you know what the good news in all of this is? We are seeing right before our eyes a man who did his job well, a congressman who did his job well, and a party that has done its job well, and a Speaker of the House that finally did his job well. And at last, we have a select committee, and we know that this story is going to be kept alive, and more information is going to come out. And guess what? The rest of the mainstream media is slowly being forced to report it. As you saw, the ABC News was obliged to ask Hillary a question, and they're going to be forced to stay on it. There are consequences to all our actions. One of the most important of all is that the president's poll numbers are tumbling. And this shows that in our republic, bit by bit, inch by inch, with the efforts of good people, there is accountability. You are listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture of WorldTribune.com, and today I sure am happy.
Clap along if you know what happiness is to you, because I'm
stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Ain't it fun living in the real world? Ain't it good?
Welcome back to American Heartland. I am Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com. And we had a lot of fun this week because the good news came in twos and threes. Not only do we get a select committee on Benghazi, but also this week, the House decided to hold Lois Lerner, who previously led the tax-exempt division of the IRS. Now she's infamous in America. Lois Lerner, the woman in the blue jacket who refused to testify. The House held her in contempt. Wow. Can you imagine what that feels like? Can you imagine what that feels like? One of the few people in the history of the United States that ends up with a resolution by the American Congress holding you, saying that you are in contempt of them. Basically, the American people hold you in contempt. It's a very disturbing thing. It's very disturbing pass. I mean, she should have simply given her version of events. Many Americans would have possibly sympathized with her had she simply just revealed that the direction to do what she did came from above her. There would be sympathy for that. I mean, a lot of us have been in that position where management is barreling down on you, telling you that this is the policy, a policy that you have to implement. Right now, by being so loyal to the Obama administration, she got on the wrong side of Congress. And it wasn't just Republicans who decided to hold her in contempt. 6 Democrats joined. That is huge news. Because increasingly, it's going to be harder and harder for the Democrats to point this as merely a Republican project. Increasingly, it's going to be clear this is an American project. We are united in this. And as I said, the good news came in twos and then in threes, because not only did the House hold her in contempt, but then the House got a resolution passed calling for a special counsel to look into the IRS scandal. So we are ratcheting up the pressure regarding the IRS scandal. And the best news of all, guess how many Democrats joined in that vote? You had 26 Democrats who supported that resolution. So how is the Obama administration going to present this as anything other than the outrage of the American people? Outrage, by the way, that he said he initially had and that he was going to get to the bottom of. That is, of course, before he forgot that and decided to go down the path of it's a phony scandal and there's not a smidgen of corruption here. Well, the American people are speaking loud and clear. When the IRS starts to abuse its powers, we are all in danger. We are all threatened, and it doesn't matter what political party you belong to. Today, Republicans or Tea Party groups were at the wrong end of that poking of all the probing of the IRS and the suppression of activity by the IRS. And in another day or two or another week or two, a year or two, whatever it is, whatever the amount of time, it will be Democrats or independents or another group that will be at the wrong end of the IRS bureaucracy. So this is an issue that concerns everybody. And I believe, too, that the president's failure to get ahead of the issue, to appear to be the leader in the investigation, is hurting him because it clearly shows that he has something to hide. And he comes across as deceitful, dishonest, cowardly, ineffective, weak, pathetic. And more than all of that, I think the fact that all of this happened in 1 week is reiterating a theme that I have been pounding since this show began, and that is that the presidency of Barack Obama, the second term, is illegitimate because it was won with illegitimate acts. It was won with lies about Benghazi. They're lying to the American people about what happened, and they also suppress the political activity of the Tea Party. Hence, he does not belong in the White House. I am convinced of that. Now, some people are saying, okay, so we now have this Lois Lerner has been held in contempt. What's going to come of that? The Attorney General of the United States was held in contempt by Congress, and nothing happened. Well, this time, it's a little bit different. Listen to what Jim Jordan, a Republican representative, had to say on the consequences of this contempt vote. Roll it, Brittany.
The vote for Lois Lerner, 6 Democrats joined the Republicans. But tell me, is this vote, is there any teeth to this vote, or is it just show? What's going to happen?
Well, no, it's going to go to a judge eventually. And remember, the Justice Department appealed some of the others, like the Holder. When we held Attorney General Holder in contempt, they appealed it. And the legal argument was executive privilege. I don't think they're going to exert, put forward that argument because I don't think they want to admit that the president in any way talked with Lois Lerner. So we think it actually gets to a judge. We think we get the judge will say, look, go talk to Congress and answer the questions. So we think there's a strong likelihood there. Now in the special counsel, that's
but let me ask you this question though. Let me ask you a question, though. In order to get to the judge, don't you have to essentially hand it to the Attorney General of the United States, and he's the one who has to present it to the grand jury or the judge? I mean, you've got to go through the Attorney General of the United States. You don't just bypass him, right?
No. There's a U.S. attorney who the statute says shall take it to a grand jury. So it's a shall statute, not a may. So the U.S. attorney should take it to a grand jury. Now, there's no time frame on that. We'd obviously like it to happen sooner rather than later. But it's a U.S. attorney shall take it to a grand jury. Grand jury is going to say, yes, the House did, in fact, hold you in contempt. Let's get it to a judge. Then we'll see what kind of legal theory the Justice Department comes up with.
The Attorney General, I mean, I use the phrase the Attorney General. You're right about the U.S. Attorney, but the U.S. Attorney works for the Attorney General of the United States. Is there no discretion for the prosecutor, the U.S. Attorney, to decline to prosecute? Are you saying that he absolutely, the language is absolutely shall, and he has absolutely no option as to go to a grand jury?
That's my understanding. It's shall language every time this has happened where it's not been someone in the Justice Department like Holder, when they've not brought forth the legal theory that it's executive privilege. Every other time this has happened, it's went to the grand jury, then went to the judge, and the judge has said, yes, you are in contempt, go answer questions or go to jail. And obviously when there's a threat of jail, people typically find, see the light and they come answer our questions. That's what we hope happens here. That's been the history.
Well, this is really, really interesting because the only way that the Attorney General was able to avoid further prosecution, the only way that contempt vote didn't have teeth was because they exerted this theory of executive privilege. They cannot do that this time. They cannot do that this time, as Mr. Jordan so well explained. And that is because if they try to say that we can't hold her in contempt because she spoke to the president, then that proves the case that Republicans have been trying to make. So they can't do that. So they're in a box right now. How are they going to get out of it? She is going to be forced to either testify, or she's going to be forced to go to jail, or there's another thing that can happen, and I pray to God it doesn't happen. You know what sometimes happens to key witnesses? They suddenly die of a heart attack by nefarious forces. So those are the likely 3 outcomes here. She's either going to have to testify, she's either going to go to jail, or something dreadful is going to happen to her. And I truly hope that it's not number 3. The person that is going to make this decision is Ronald Machen. He is the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia. And as Mr. Jordan so well explained, apart from Eric Holder being able to cite executive privilege in his particular case, there's no precedent. There's no precedent for a refusal of a judge to have a grand jury insist that she comply with the requirements of the Congress. There's no precedent for that. It would be history making if they tried to fudge this. So we see that the noose is indeed tightening. And as for explaining further all the consequences of this, Mr. Jim Jordan seems to be quite confident that the public is going to continue to rally, especially since we are seeing a growing bipartisan cry to get to the bottom of the IRS scandal. Roll it, Brittany.
All right, 26 Democrats with the IRS special counsel. It surprised you that you got 26 Democrats?
No, that is huge. The fact that 26 Democrats, a bipartisan majority, thinks and knows that the investigation currently going on at the Department of Justice is a joke. When you leak to the Wall Street Journal, no one's going to be prosecuted. When the president says there's no corruption, not even a smidgen, and when Barbara Bosterman, the lead investigator on this case, gave $6,750, a max-out contributor to the president's campaign is leading the investigation. Everyone knows this is a joke. And now to have 26 Democrats come alongside with us and vote for a special counsel, this is huge. I mean, this is huge news that many Democrats see that, look, we got to have a real investigation here, something that's impartial, something that's actually going to get to the truth.
Thank God for midterm elections, because suddenly some Democrats are seeing the light. They're saying the truth at last. Well, not all. You have those in very safe seats, like the Democrat from Maryland, Elijah Cummings. He's still trying to tell us that, in fact, he and others are upholding the Constitution right now because they are defending Lois Lerner's right to take the Fifth Amendment, when, in fact, by giving such a long speech before she took the Fifth, she made her Fifth null and void, as every legal scholar and legal analyst has said. So here you have Elijah Cummings trying to tell us that as the IRS is wrecking our Constitution, Lois Lerner and her Fifth Amendment and his support of that is a form of upholding it.
Let me say this. This is the first time since the 1950s and 60s that a committee has stripped somebody of their Fifth Amendment right and then at the same time went on to a criminal contempt citation. And this is unprecedented except in the McCarthy era. And even in that era, it failed. And so, I'm wondering where we're going here, Joe. It seems as if there has been an effort to, again, my argument was not that I don't want to hear what Ms. Lerner had to say. I really do want to hear it. But you know what? There's something that is more significant than that, and that is upholding the constitutional rights of every single American. And that's what this is about. Jeremy,
well, this really, really rings hollow, because the core of this issue is that the constitutional rights of Americans to participate without harassment in the political process, that right was violated. That is the nub. That is the heart of the issue. So this constitutional argument, it's just not going to work. And furthermore, it's not the committee that stripped her of her Fifth Amendment right. She blew it. Her lawyer blew it. And that's why we're here. So you see him playing fast and loose with the facts, fast and loose with the truth, and fast and loose with the American Constitution. Well, fortunately, it really doesn't matter what Mr. Cummings says. You know why? Because 6 other Democrats decided she should be held in contempt. 26 others also are calling for the special counsel. And the American people are saying it is as clear as black and white. There is a huge scandal here.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
I'll never forget the way you look tonight.
Welcome back to American Heartland. This is Dr. Grace, upholding values that are never, ever going to die. Well, that song is The Lady in Red, but really we're going to be talking about a lady in blue, or she used to be in a blue dress. There was a famous blue dress. In fact, nowadays, this lady posed in white on the cover of Vanity Fair. It's Monica Lewinsky. She is now a 40-year-old woman reflecting on her behavior as a 22-year-old when she engaged in a scandal with then-President Bill Clinton, a scandal that made international headlines and made both her and him the butt of jokes around the world. Well, it's interesting, I must say. I read very carefully the excerpt that has been released so far, and I really look forward to reading the rest. To be honest with you, I'm guilty here. I'm one of those people that have made jokes about Monica Lewinsky. And I realize that a lot of that is grounded in the fact that we were so outraged at her behavior and the president's behavior. But now, when you read what she wrote, I can't help but feel sympathetic towards her a little bit. And I'll tell you why. I mean, who doesn't look back on what we did in our teens or in our 20s and doesn't say, boy, I behaved like a big jerk back then? I think lots of us can say that or can point to certain incidences that we wish we hadn't done. I could go on and on about the things I did during that time that I look back and say, gee, what an idiot I was. But, you know, the difference between us and her is, well, hopefully none of us engaged in an extramarital affair and did things that were so morally outrageous. But I think lots of us can say, well, I was young and stupid. I did some stupid things, yes. And I think from the perspective of a 40-year-old, what she did back then was really stupid. And she does take some responsibility for it. She says, I myself deeply regret what happened between me and President Clinton. Let me say it again. I myself deeply regret what happened. So she regrets it. But one of the things that's interesting here is, why does she regret it? And is she sorry? See, it's one thing to say, I regret it. But it's another thing to be sorry about an action that you committed. Everything that I read, she doesn't seem to understand the full magnitude still to this day, even as a 40-year-old, why her behavior was so atrocious. So she expresses regret, but we have to ask ourselves this question. Does she regret it because she got caught? Does she regret it because Bill Clinton didn't leave his wife for her? Does she regret it because she became the butt of jokes? Or is she sorry that she violated a marital oath, that she disgraced the White House and the president, and that she set a bad example to girls all around the world? Remember, the Bible tells us something. Do not be the cause of scandal. Do not set a bad example. These are very grave sins. And why are they sins? They are sins because of the hurt that we cause others. So I sympathize with Monica Lewinsky insofar as she regrets her behavior as a young woman. But my sympathy stops there because I don't think that she's sorry. I don't see anywhere here my behavior was so out of line. I hurt others. The focus of this article seems to be all about her. Her humiliation. Everything that was done to her. And remember, Hillary Clinton referred to her back in the 90s as a narcissistic Looney Tune. Well, she's not a Looney Tune. But I have to agree with the first part of that. She's pretty darn narcissistic. I mean, does she not realize the moral offense of her actions has to do with the hurt that she caused other people? And all of us who revere the White House, and all of us who hold marriage sacred. And regardless of whether or not Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton have an open relationship or not, you don't touch another person's spouse. You don't go there. It is a very grave sin, and it offends all married people. Because if you're willing to destroy one marriage, why not another, and another? It is why we condemn adultery, to protect all marriage and all families. And then, too, Chelsea. I don't see any real regret about the people that she hurt. What about Chelsea as a young woman then, who had to endure herself as a woman this public spectacle going on? Do you know how devastating that must have been to her? Because there's a big difference between a family's dirty laundry, which is kept secret, and a family's dirty laundry, which is on every newspaper in the country and around the world. So this is the problem I have with Monica Lewinsky. She's focused on herself, and she's looking for a new role for herself. And that new role now is to transform this humiliation into something that is going to help others. So here we see that she's going to try to teach others how to deal with internet bullying, she says, because she was one of the first who suffered global humiliation as a result of the internet. Lady, I got news for you. You would have suffered global humiliation even if the internet wasn't around. I mean, when you have an affair with the President of the United States, even if we were in the 19th century, you would have incurred global scorn. So the internet has nothing to do with it. The culture of bullying has nothing to do with it. This is an old sin, what she did. She poked around in a garden that wasn't hers. This is the sin of Adam and Eve. She tasted the forbidden fruit. She will go down in history as one who committed this grave sin, no matter what she does afterwards. So now she's trying to find some kind of a role for herself. To me, even though she says in this article that she wants to help others, I'm not really sure about that because she seems so focused on herself and doesn't seem to fully care about the wrongs, the hurts of others that she inflicted. And I don't really see an apology to the American people. So I don't think she fully yet gets it, even as a 40-year-old. But I must say, she makes some good points. And one of the really powerful points in the piece is this, is she said that as a result of her actions and Bill Clinton's actions, she was branded in the public imagination. Let me quote this passage, which I think is really important. The Clinton administration, the special prosecutor's minions, the political operatives on both sides of the aisle, and the media were able to brand me. And that brand stuck in part because it was imbued with power. Now, that last part is very profound. The brand stuck because it was imbued with power. And it's true. But you know whose power it was predominantly imbued by? Predominantly by Bill and Hillary Clinton and a media establishment that was more concerned with supporting them than protecting her. What did Bill and Hillary Clinton do when the news broke? They tried to blame everybody, and they didn't take responsibility for what had happened. They didn't take responsibility individually or as a couple. In fact, Hillary Clinton behaved like a narcissistic Looney Tune. Remember what she said in 1998.
The great story here for anybody willing to find it and write about it and explain it is this vast right-wing conspiracy that has been conspiring against my husband since the day he announced for president.
When your husband clearly does something wrong, don't point the finger at everybody else. So she sounds rather narcissistic. She's the victim in all this. No, she was for many, many years, we now clearly know, not the victim, but the enabler, the co-conspirator. And this is an important passage. It was imbued with power. The brand stuck because it was imbued with power. It was imbued by the power of Bill Clinton, who objectified her as that woman, who objectified her instead of taking responsibility as the older person who should have guided a younger person towards proper conduct. And Hillary Clinton, too, the older woman who should have stood up for the rights of the younger one. Now, there's speculation out there in the media. Is this going to harm or hurt Hillary? Some people are crazy enough to speculate that bringing up this Monica Lewinsky story once again actually benefits Hillary Clinton. Roll it, Brittany.
Clinton watcher Ruth Marcus argues Lewinsky has done Hillary a big favor. now, if there is a Hillary Clinton campaign for president in 2016, we can move on from the Lewinsky scandal of yore.
Every time Lewinsky is mentioned, it is good for Hillary Clinton. It reminds everybody of her major accomplishments on the world stage, and people tend to be more sympathetic to Hillary Clinton than Monica Lewinsky because she is the woman's corner.
That is so wrong because of a couple of things. First of all, Monica Lewinsky is now a 40-year-old woman who can defend herself. And this story is now going to have legs and new legs. And you know why else it's going to harm Hillary Clinton? Because many, many women who are analyzing the situation with fresh eyes, that there is no president right now to protect in the White House. There is no Bill Clinton there to protect. The women examining this, analyzing it, thinking about it. Many women who have been subjected to harassment or sexual pressure at the workplace. They can ask themselves this question: who came to my defense? Who comes to my defense? Well, let me tell you a story from my point of view. When I was a young professor at Howard University, and I don't want to mention any names, but some faculty members, men, made inappropriate comments. And it never got to the level of sexual harassment, although it could have. But it never got to that level. You know why? Because there was a couple of other hard-nosed female faculty members that took them to the woodshed. In other words, the older women protected the younger faculty member. And I think a lot of women out there now in the workplace who have female bosses and female superiors and other females that have helped them, they're going to look at Hillary Clinton and ask themselves this question. That was a woman in a position of power. What did she do, or what did she not do to protect another woman that was being subjected to the advances of a powerful man? What did she do? What did she not do? And I don't think that there's any woman in America on any side of the aisle that can look to what Hillary Clinton do and say that she was heroic as a woman. In fact, far, far, far from it. As an older woman, instead of protecting the younger one, she became the predator, just like her husband. And that story is going to continue to haunt her, just like all the other bad news that is continuing to come out regarding her tenure as Secretary of State. You are listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that are never going to die.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
There's something happening here, but what it is ain't exactly clear. There's a man with a gun over there, telling me I got to beware. I think it's time we stop, children. What's that?
Welcome back to American Heartland. You're listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that are never, ever, 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 ever going to die. Well, talk about a strange sound. The sound of a blast. There's a big, big story on worldtribune.com. It is going viral. It is a huge blast has been reported near a secret Iranian nuclear site in the city of Qazvin. So essentially, a secret nuclear enrichment facility has just been blown up. And 50 people have been injured. So far, it doesn't seem that we have any fatalities, but 50 people are dead. And we do not know more than that. Although the story is going viral, why? Because there's widespread speculation that the Israelis are taking matters into their own hands. They don't trust the Obama administration to keep them safe. They do not believe that there's a genuine rapprochement between the West and Iran. They fear for their very lives. They fear they will be incinerated by an Iranian regime that will blow them up with nuclear weapons. And so, for the second time, an underground nuclear facility suddenly goes up in smoke. In January in 2013, an Iranian underground nuclear facility in Vuoto was bombed. Are the Israelis taking matters into their own hands? To be continued. But check out that story and check out all the chatter about that. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more stories like this as American credibility and prestige and power dwindles around the world. Other nations are going to take matters into their own hands to protect themselves. Well, a great article this week by Brent Bozell. I'm a fan of his work. It's called Whistling Past the Bad Polls. And what he points out is that in March of 2006, President Bush had stumbled into a record low approval rating of 34%. You might all remember that, since for most of us that was pretty recent, 2006. We lived through the Bush administration. And if you recall, CNN was reporting that figure, as he says, every hour on the hour. Essentially, when President Bush hit rock bottom in the polls, everybody knew about it because the media was constantly reporting it. And Mr. Bozell contrasts that with the latest findings by ABC and the Washington Post. They now are saying, quote, that the president is now facing the worst poll numbers of his presidency, end of quote. So he has a rating of 41%, with 52% of the American people disapproving of his handling of the nation, in fact. And so what is the media doing with this information? With George Bush at 34%, they were reporting it every hour on the hour. With Obama, they are trying to keep it as quiet as possible. And the whole article shows you all of the media entities that are discussing these poll numbers and how they're dealing with it. So they have two strategies. They discuss it very quickly, and they attribute it to one of two things. They say that this is a result either of the economy not improving as well as Americans would like, or because of the Obamacare rollout. Forget the fact that polling on Obamacare has remained consistent. The American people didn't like it. They didn't like it before the rollout. They don't like it after the rollout. They're not really saying that all of the cumulative scandals have taken a huge wear and tear on this president's approval ratings. And everything all combined, his handling of the economy and foreign policy and just about everything he's touched hasn't quite panned out. And the American people have caught up with that reality. No, you're not going to hear any of that from ABC. You're not going to hear any of that from NBC. And you're also not going to hear about how Republican fortunes are rising. Only USA Today, in fact, did report something very important. In fact, they had a front page headline on May 5th, and it read, polls show the biggest advantage for Republicans in 2 decades. So the USA Today points out that the GOP advantage is 47% to 43%, but, quote from USA Today, this is the strongest tilt to Republican candidates at this point in a midterm year in at least 2 decades, including before partisan waves in 1994 and 2010 that swept the GOP into power. In addition, 65% of Americans, quote, listen to this, want the president elected in 2016 to pursue different policies and programs than the Obama administration, end of quote. So the poll numbers are very, very, very bad for this president. And that is why we are cheerful today on American Heartland, because we feel we're not cheerful that the president has done such a horrible job. We're just grateful that the American people are recognizing that fact, and hopefully will hold him and his party accountable in 2016. Well, you know, there's one moron in the news, Chris Matthews. He never fails to disappoint in his analysis. He discusses the midterms, and he discussed the possible GOP takeover of the Senate, which more and more Democrats are saying is likely to happen right now. And he says that the GOP takeover of the presidency is really all about trying to humiliate President Barack Obama. Roll it, Brittany.
With. You know, Joan, I've said this before. I think the Republican goal is to make President Obama's presidency itself an asterisk.
Yes.
He really wasn't president. Like a guy who used drugs in baseball or gambled in baseball, one of those things. Well, asterisk, he really doesn't belong to be on the batting list of all time. I think that if they can use the next 2 years to stifle the guy, to smother him politically, force him to spend all his time battling just to not sign things, they win.
You know, the implication here is they want to make, he's basically saying that this is a form of racism, right? Why would you want to make a presidency an asterisk? He's impugning these evil motives to all of us who want the Republicans to take over the Senate. When we wanted the takeover of either House of Congress, or we wanted to dominate either House of Congress in previous presidencies, was it about making the existing president an asterisk? When the Democrats took over the Congress during the Bush years, did the Democrats want to make George Bush an asterisk? They wanted power to pursue their agenda. Why is every analysis different when it comes to Barack Obama? We want to take over the Senate to block the president's policies. Period. And we want to take over the Senate to block the president's policies, not because we necessarily have a personal animus to the man, but because we think that they're destructive for the country. It's that simple. Why do they have to impugn, imply, suggest all these nefarious, evil motives lurking in the hearts of conservatives and Tea Party members? Why can't they acknowledge that independents who formerly supported the president are turning away? The youth who formerly supported are turning away. Members of his own base are disenchanted. Is it because they have some evil, racist motive in their heart? Or is it simply because we all gave this man a chance to run the country, and 65% of the American public has concluded that he cannot do the job? And nor can the Democrats do the job. Can it be that, Chris Matthews? An analysis that you might very simply use when talking about any other president? But for Barack Obama, every analysis has to come down to the evil that lurks in the soul of the American heart. Well, shame on you. Why don't you stop acting so high and mighty like you're the only pure one? You're the only one that has pure intentions in America. We who desire a change, of course, have the purest of intentions. That is to safeguard our republic so that we can ensure the greatest happiness and prosperity in this country for all citizens. So give us, just once in a while, just a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, Mr. Matthews. Well, another nutty story this week. You're not going to believe this one. The Center for Reproductive Rights met with a body at the United Nations. They met with a specific group of the United Nations that tries to protect people around the world from torture. And this group, the Center for Reproductive Rights, is urging the UN, check this out, you're not going to believe it, they're urging the UN to tell the Catholic Church that it has no right to oppose abortion. They're basically saying that if you oppose abortion, you are possibly inflicting torture on some women around the world who might want to choose abortion. And so you see this really disturbing phenomenon, which is an attempt to criminalize the teachings of the Catholic Church, and more important, there is repeatedly an attempt now to criminalize the Christian faith. They want to first muzzle Christians. If they can't muzzle Christians, they're going to try to criminalize Christianity, make it illegal somehow. So this group wants the United Nations to use its power and use its conventions, its established body of international law, to act against Christian teaching, because they say that this kind of Christian teaching against abortion is harmful to women and possibly to children, as in young women who might want an abortion. This is twisted, and they're even saying they don't want the Catholic Church to hide behind, you're not going to believe this, freedom of speech and freedom of religion. They are assaulting the content of Christianity, and they are saying that they don't want us to hide behind freedom of speech and freedom of religion. That is a very disturbing trend, and one that we have to fight with all our strength. You are listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that are never going to die.
Well, if you ask me where I come from, here's what I tell everyone. I was born by God's dear grace.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.